get, can you switch over to the iPad? I was approached about, and I feel that I'm still a student here, so I'm going to tell you what I've learned, and maybe it can be useful to you. I intend this to be, can you all hear me fine? I intend this to be as much a discussion, and I'm going to tell you about my process for making paintings and some of the things I've learned in just the last 6 months that I feel have added a lot of quality to my paintings. But I'm not opposed to any kind of discussion. We can talk about marketing, and we can talk about where I'm going to mention where I do reproductions. I mean, there's a lot more besides planning, drawing, painting. There's selling and making money and what it is you want to do with art. And I can tell you some of those things as well. So, all right. The agenda that I propose is we talk about this. I'm going to talk about digital tools because part of my process involves digital tools, and that involves AI. I have 40 years in computer science, and so everything looks to me as through the filter of computers. If there's a computer involved, I'm probably on it, trying it, and seeing if I can do that. So we'll talk about digital tools, and that includes AI. And some people don't like AI, and I've gone the other way around. I'm running to it and using it, and we'll talk about that and show you some ways that I use that. And one of the things that I'll do to do that is I'll go through a case study of one of my more recent paintings, which is a commission that was done because it illustrates a lot of the things that I'll be talking about. One of the things that I've then changed in my process is what I call digital compare, but it's a process of using my digital tools, my cameras, to compare my art with what my plan is to make sure I don't deviate too far from where I want to be. That was never really a problem in landscapes. You know, if the tree looks a little weird or it's not in the right place, it's still a tree, it still reads as a tree, everybody's good with that. But when you're doing figurative work and faces, just the tiniest fraction of an inch, and especially I've been doing religious paintings, you know, you change the angle of line of the mouth, and Jesus is smiling, or he's got a smirk, or he's frowning. The shapes in the eyes, if you have the whites of the eyes, if they're not the right shape, the eyes will look one direction or another, or you'll get different expressions, or they'll be cockeyed. And so what I found was that my drawing techniques and my drawing skills were failing me. At least they weren't good enough to get where I wanted to be. So that's this digital compare, and I'll show you how we do that. And we will do that together as a group. And the reason I want to do that is because there are some things that took me a while to figure out, and if I can help you, if you think it's a useful tool for you, then you'll want to know how to do it. We'll talk about AI, and I have a link for you with a document that I keep up to date. I started it a year ago, and it's changing. Every time I go back and I test it, the models are getting better and better at what they do. I have a list of favorite tools that when I started thinking about doing this back in October, I thought about what I could tell you, and I have 10 tools that I want to tell you that I like, that if you're not using them, I can talk about reproduction and what I've been doing, and I can talk about what I've been doing for sales, and I have business cards. It looks like we may be out of them. Are we out of all the business cards back there? They're the little 4x6 cards. I have, oh, there's plenty, okay. I have more of those, but I can talk about how I am trying to engage with customers at art shows. And I'm finding that the way I engage with them has helped my sales. We can talk about that. I assume most people here are interested not just in creating art, but in selling art. So I can tell you some things that I've found there. And then if we have time, I can come back and I can show you this digital compare process painting. So there's a couple of steps that I go through. I think that is going to be less exciting, and we won't have time to get there. But I'll do that. I have my paints here, but it's not that different from what other people do. I started 25 years ago painting on, wasn't a dare, but had a friend. I was whining that I sometimes wished I'd been a painter. The guy said, well, you're only 40, go take some classes. So I did. Took some plein air classes, fell in love with plein air. I was a weekend warrior, would go out and paint, come home with stuff, and have been very active in the landscape and plein air community. But I really have this itch to do figurative work, and in particular religious work. When I moved out to Utah 6 years ago, I had this idea in my head that I was going to start doing figurative work, and I was going to get rich. Because I was going to, there was so many people, there was so much demand, and what I found when I got out here is that there's a lot of really good artists already well established in that market, and my skills were not up to snuff, so I started taking classes. Dan Wilson, if you know, anybody know Dan Wilson? He teaches a really good class, and you'll see a lot of his style and teaching in my art, but I do things a little bit differently. Anyway, over the last 5 years, I've been doing that. I've done some inspirational and religious art, and some of it's turned out pretty good. Some of it was lesser good. And I had some experiences where I worked really hard on a couple paintings and got some into some shows, and that gave me some additional momentum. But the last 6 months, things have really taken off for me, and it's, I think, because I've improved my process. That's the only thing that I can identify that's really different between what I'm doing now, and I tripled my sales this last 6 months from what I did the year before. So, and I'm happy. There's no questions off the table. I'm happy to go as deep as you want to into those things. But that's what I'm going to talk about, is what is my process right now for figurative. I'm not doing it for landscape. I still go out and landscape and see what I try and see, and plein air, I still try and do it, from my eyes and stuff. But when I get into the figurative, I'm using these digital tools. I thought that I would just show you some of the stuff that I've been doing recently. And I want to show you because when at least in my eye, I feel that I've improved over the last, this is the last 6 months that I've been doing here. And then when you go to the other pages, we get into, that was one of the earlier ones that I was really happy with, but some of my angels could be better. I'll talk about this particular drawing of Jesus in the desert, because I used a different technique. And it's on my list of slides as things that didn't quite work as well. It's something that I tried. I had a person who, and this one, this Mary and the Child, was one that I had a lot of hopes for, and I tried this other process, and it didn't turn out as nicely as I wanted to. I had an artist who I greatly respect, who looked at my work about 2 years ago and said, you need to improve your drawing. And so I decided that I was going to draw every day. And so I worked really hard to get my drawing going, and I brought, just, not that you really care, but as a proof that I have spent a lot of time trying to improve my drawing, and you can see that, but this technique has helped me tune it a little bit more. And I'm open to questions anytime as we go along here. All right, let's talk just a minute about an art process. And you can think about it in a lot of different ways, but as an old engineer, I like boxes and arrows between the boxes. And I like to think of a planning stage where you think about what you're going to do, and some people are very crisp in their planning. And I see Carol Granger back there, and I've been watching her do her thumbnails. And that's part of the planning process. There's a drawing process, and I actually right now separate out this drawing process from my painting process. I know a lot of people are really into, Becky Tobiasen is really into mixing these two, you know, so that you kind of get things on and you kind of move things around. I have not had success doing that. I end up with eyes in the wrong place or things that are not satisfactory to me. So I tightened up my process, and I know a lot of really good artists say, no, you need to loosen up. But for me, I needed to tighten up, and that gave me what I wanted. But there's a plan, and there's a draw, and there's a paint, and then we can have over here, we have sail kind of thing, and we can talk about that. But for right now, we're going to talk about plan, draw, and paint. And digital tools are there that can help you in your traditional process. And those tools are AI, and AI can help you in the planning process. I got another slide here. What direction do I go? I don't want to draw. What do I do to go to the next slide? I don't know. Well, I can draw on it, but that's not doing what I want.
Brian,
Yeah.
let's see, when you're back in it, go to the top corner where it'll give you the slides.
Yeah.
Is that a PowerPoint?
This is PowerPoint. It's PowerPoint, and it's on my iPad, which I've not really used before. So
Now you should be able to slide.
anyway, you can use. If we want to start talking about AI, AI can help you get ideas, and it can help you take those ideas and get source material. Source images from AI don't have copyright. So, you know, I can go out and I can do a search for a woman writing a letter, and I can find all sorts of Shutterstock and other kinds of things that look really good, but they have a copyright. And if I use those in my drawing, it doesn't, I have to pay the royalty or something for it, right, or get in trouble. But all of the stuff that comes out of AI, Congress has, and the Supreme Court have stated that nobody owns it. You can't copyright it. That means it's fair game for me as an artist, but it also means that the other artists, it's fair game for them too. So it's kind of a trade-off, it's kind of a caveat. But to the extent that you need ideas or source photos, AI can be used for that. It can be used for composition. You can tell it, you know, lay stuff out for me in a certain way. And I had one project that what I did was I iteratively drew with pencil some better than stick figures, but not much better, and gave it in and said, make this into something for me. And I got something out, and I took it, and I said, okay, I want it different. And I did a little bit better drawing and put it in and got something out. And that gave me source material that I could then manipulate, and I'll show you how I do that. Manipulate that source material. It can be used for composition. There's this big question about what if, you know, and AI could be used for what if. I had one drawing that I had used an AI source, and I had a really hard time figuring out, because it was dark in the edges, I had a hard time figuring out where the back of the head was. So I took the AI image that I had, I took my art where it was at, and I gave it to one of the AI systems, and I said, this is a dark drawing. Put it in light. And when it put it in light, suddenly I could see the back of the person's head, and I was able to use that. I mean, there's all sorts of tricks that you can use, and I have a document this is my business art website. This is my other website that I maintain for a whole bunch of other reasons, but it points to this website, but on that, if you scroll down, there is I think that there's a link to a document, and in your notes, there is right there a QR code that you can go to, and it will take you to a document that I've written that I keep up to date on all of the tools that that you can use for AI. Some of the things they do, some samples of the output that comes from them, whether they cost money, and that's changing all the time too. Some of the things that used to be free aren't free anymore. Some of them have a time limit, that kind of stuff.
Brian,
Yeah.
I saw another interesting use of AI. A local artist posted on Instagram that he actually used it to critique his painting. And
Yes, you can.
several
Yes, you can.
suggestions on how to improve it. I thought that was
Yes, you can. In fact, I regularly, it's not so bad to get a critique. It can tell you some things. That's nice. ChatGPT will do that. Grok will do that. But I have regularly used it for names because I run out of ideas after morning this or sunset that. And I have gone in several times and given it the painting and say, I suggest 5 names for me that have 4 words or less for this painting. And sometimes they're pretty good, and other times I'll take pieces of them and use them, but it gives me some ideas for that. Then we have Procreate or other tools like Photoshop that you can use, which is really a digital photo editor, and there's some things you can use for that. You're not going to get ideas on source, but you can work on composition with those tools. Composition. And I use it for a quality check.
You're talking about Photoshop?
This is Photoshop or Procreate. I use Procreate because it's easier and I don't have to pay $20 a month for a license. I'm still a cheap
What about
painter.
GIMP?
It does a lot of good what-if things too. What?
What about GIMP? Have you ever used GIMP?
I have GIMP. I don't like GIMP. I find it hard to use, but it will do almost everything that Photoshop does. And the stuff that I'll show you today, you could do with GIMP if you're good with it. Yeah.
On Procreate, it only works for the iPad, is that right? Or-
Procreate only works for the iPad. There are Android tablets that have some art programs, but I'm not familiar with them.
And how about the desktop? Would you recommend, like Photoshop or something?
I don't use Photoshop because of the price, but there's one called Affinity Photo, and it just got bought by Canva. So Canva has some tools. Canva has some AI tools. They're pretty good if you want to pay. They have like a $13 a month fee. A lot of these AI tools have fees associated with them.
Did they remove the perpetual license for Affinity?
Affinity does have a perpetual license, and you pay $30 for it. And what Canva did is they bought Affinity, and they're giving it away now. So if you bought the perpetual license for Affinity, which I did, then you still have the license, but someone else can go get it for free from Canva.
I got it too.
But those are all valid tools, and the things that I'm going to now show you and talk about are applicable to other art systems, not just the ones that I use, but you can get some benefit from them. So let's go through. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting something here. Yeah, so I want to walk through this recent painting and some of the things that I did for that. Where are we at in time? Okay,
At least an
we're
hour.
moving along
Yeah.
here through our time. All right, I'm going to come into, here's Procreate, and I'm going to talk about this particular painting right here. So this was a commission, and the person came to me, they'd seen my art at the religious show, and they said, we really like that, do you do commissions? And we had the discussion, he said, we have this granddaughter who is just the brightest child on earth, and we want to capture her brightness in a painting. I said, sure, we can try that. And they said, this is the photo that you have to work with. And I said, okay, I think what we should do is do kind of just her face, kind of a portrait kind of thing. No, we want the whole body in there. Well, there's not a whole body there, right? And so what I do, the first thing I do when I start working with this is I'll take the photo that I've got, and I start with a canvas that is the same size that I'm going to do, and I can do different sizes to start with, but I start with the same size that I think it's gonna be. I did a couple of thumbnail ideas first to decide whether I wanted a square orientation or I wanted landscape, and did this. And I moved this around. It's been clipped on the edges, but I tried to see where it would be. And I said to myself, she's looking out a window at probably a garbage truck out there. I mean, I don't know what she's looking at. But I said, and I didn't like the pain in there. I mean, I wanted to do something that I was gonna be happy with at the end, right? Not just it met their requirement. And I said, what would you think if we had her outside, under a tree in the grass, and she's looking at something outside? I mean, I could put little cows, I could put a squirrel nearby, and we ended up with a butterfly, right? Let's do a butterfly. She can be looking at a butterfly. So I went back to AI, and I took this image, and I put it into my AI system, and I said, I need a picture of this little girl, and I need her in under a tree or in the grass, and I need her looking at a butterfly. So what I got out, I got dozens of photos that I had to go through that it came up with, but there were two. This was one, and I put the butterfly in there. She's looking at, but in the actual picture that AI gave me, the butterfly's off. It was not helping me with composition, but it did help me with the little girl. And then the other one that we got was this one. And I put the butterfly in, and I took it back to him, and I said, what do you think here? And he said, we really like this one. So this became my source image. Now this image is more than just the one image, because I've got butterflies that I've added there, right, to try and get my composition the way that I wanted. I felt that I needed a second butterfly in there. I played with the size of the first butterfly. I don't remember where I got the image of the butterfly. I might have taken that just from the web. I don't remember. But I basically started with this, and this image was actually much bigger. There were butterflies off on the side, but it gave me something that I could work with, and it looked like the little girl. At least to the customer, it looked like the little girl. So we were good there. I took that and went, let me go back here to gallery. So then I took that and I started building on that. That is not showing me what I thought that I was going to see here, but it's okay. I did the drawing on this one, and I took it back to the customer, and I said, this is what I'm doing. Are you still good with this, right? Because the last thing that anybody wants on a commission is to get to the end and have the customer say, I'm not sure I like that anymore. So I tried to bring the customer along at all of the different stages. I used digital to begin to see colors, right? Just by kind of putting in backgrounds there. I put in the butterflies. Okay, so what I do, and this is a preview of this step that I call the digital compare. I take the image that I have. Not sure what that is. I take the image that I have and I start drawing it, and I bring it in and I compare it to the drawing I have. Now, this is a really rough start on that drawing, right? Yes?
Did you hand draw that
Yes.
and then bring it into Procreate?
Yes. I drew it, I took a photo of it, I brought it into Procreate, and I'm going to show you that in gory detail. That's one of the things that I want to learn, because some steps of it are not quite so obvious. But I brought it in, and I could see I was kind of feeling pretty good about where I had it on the canvas when I was roughing it in. But I've learned in this process that the first step, you just kind of get something on there so you can go to the second step, because when I start comparing that, you can see that the head is not, head's sort of there, but I didn't have the right size on the head. Now, I'm gonna admit that I spend, on my first two steps, I spend less effort. Sometimes I say to myself, how close can I come? But the more that I put on the canvas at this point, the more I have to either move or change it if it's not in the right place. So then I go and I take another picture of it. I use that with a comparison right next to it, and I draw the next stage of the drawing with this in mind, looking at the differences between the two, and I get a better image. All right, this is getting better. The head is getting more the right shape. The body is getting in the right place. I've got the butterfly blocked in there, and I do it again. And I'll usually do this between 3 to 4 times when I compare to make sure that my drawing is where I want it to be, and I'm getting that quality check in there. So this is where I ended up on that, and you can see, hopefully, why is that different?
Can you use that one layer as a transparency?
Yes, that's what I'm doing. I did a change at one point, and maybe it's this one that will show that. So what I did was when I started drawing, I said, I've got this girl too tight in my composition. So I took my source image and I moved it around a little bit more, so I felt that it was better on the canvas. And that's why that's different. But you can see on this one that it's pretty close. I do that many times through the painting process because I find when I put paint on the canvas and I have 2 blocky pieces of paint next to each other, that sometimes those lines move. And it doesn't matter if it's a tree, it doesn't matter if it's a mountain or the snowpack, but when you're talking about eyes, and in particular in this case, when I have not just a picture of a little girl, but a likeness where the customer is expecting it to look like that little girl, not just a little girl, but that little girl, then I'm gonna check it all the way along. And the reason I check it all the way along is that it means less rework. Because there's been several times I said, well, I'll just keep going, and I do a check and I say, how did I not see that thing has shifted? And it's because when you start putting the paint on, your eyes begin to feel that it's looking good, but it's not matching what the original source was. I thought I had more examples. There's some what ifs here. There's really something I want to show you here, and I'm not sure why it's not there. It's probably in this one here. Okay. So I got further on this one, and you can see. Let's start showing you some of these steps here. So the next thing I do once I have that drawing is I harden my drawing with oils, and I usually use an underpainting. And the underpainting gives me a feeling of what my values are going to be. And by using a transparent oxide red around the lines, it also provides a buffer. So if you have something peeking out in the painting, I've found that, and a lot of artists will do this, they'll have transparent oxide red, or some artists will use magenta, and they'll let that bleed through on the edges because it provides some cohesion to the painting. So that's why this is here. I put that in to look and look at that, and then you can see these other steps, and I took a picture at each stage, partly because I wanted a record of it, but also partly because it gives me that quality check as I come along. This is, and the first thing I did was I roughed in her face, and I sent it to the customer, because if I failed at this point, I'm in trouble. If there's no point in going any further if the customer is not happy with the face and the way that it's going along. So I built the face, I adjusted the face a little bit, I put some stuff in the background, I did more adjustments to the face. He was concerned about where the eye was looking, and I didn't say to him, well, that in the original photo, she was looking over here like that. That's okay. We wanted her looking at the butterflies. I roughed in the pants. I got some more darkness in there. I talked to another artist, and she said, I think it needs to be darker, so I did some of that. And then I got to this point in the painting that I said, there's no hand. And it didn't bother me in the original source photo that AI did not put a hand. Her arms are crossed like this. But it bothered me in this painting. And so I said, what am I going to do about that? And I actually did some roughs, and I did this. I took that back to the customer, and this is where we get into what if. So if you have a painting and you have a digital tool like this, and you say, what if I make a change? Some artists are really brave, and they'll put the change on the canvas, and they don't like it, they'll take it off. I'm not that brave all the time, especially if it's wet. If it's dry, sometimes I'll let things dry totally and put it on, and then you can take it off with turpentine if it's really dry. But I took that to the customer, and he talked to his wife about it, and they decided that they liked the idea of a hand being there. But this is just some crummy little things. Then I had to come up with a hand, and we also looked at a hand reaching out for the butterfly. I actually went back to my source for my compare. Tried some different things with hands to try and get it where I wanted to. But what I ended up with, let's see if it comes up here. What I ended up with was this hand here. And that made me happy, and it made him happy, because the hand is in the right place, it's the right shape, it's the right size, and it's in motion. She's thinking about grabbing that butterfly. So that made everybody happy, and we went forward with that. I put in the grass at the end, I darkened some things, and then we picked it up. We made it in time for Christmas, and everyone was happy. So that's the story of that. I'm going to show you that I use this scale, and I left the scale back for you, but you can also get your own copy of the scale on my website. If you scroll down on Cragun.com, there is the image that I use, and I send it to Walmart, and you can get a 14-cent print at Walmart, and I print them all the time, because what I do is I can look at this and I can compare the value scale. If we go back to, I know some of you are saying, oh, that's so much work. And I totally applaud you if this works well for you without these steps. But this is what I'm doing to give myself the quality that I want. Where's my source image down there? There it is. So I can take that digital scale in the image and put it next to something in the image, and then I know where it fits in light in the room. Now, what I used to do was I would take photos and I'd print them at the right size. Go down to Walmart, it's like $3 to print a bigger print. What I found was I didn't have control over the exposure of the print, and I would get prints back and they would feel dark to me. So I paid $3 for a print, so I change it a little bit and send it back down, and I get another one, and it's still too dark. And so I tried all sorts of ways to make that work, and I could not predict what I was getting back. But this is predictable for me. I can take the digital scale and put it with the digital photo and get it looking the way I want here, and then I can use the real scale with my real paints on the real canvas, and it works out. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's one of my favorite tools. Any questions about this particular thing that I've done here? Yeah.
Where did you get all the hand images?
I looked on the web, I tried drawing some. I do books for my grandkids. Every grandkid gets a book, and they're illustrations, they're not paintings. But I use digital art, and I look online, I drew some things. I probably stole it from somewhere, I don't know. Made up a little bit, stole a little bit, you know how that goes. But it's less than 20%, so I think I'm okay. All right, I think, can I just look at my notes there, just real quick? All right, so, oh, I didn't want to do that. Come on, wake up. And go back here. All right, this is this thing that I've been talking about that I call digital compare, and I don't want to overplay this, but this is an idea. So each of my steps, I'm taking my source image, I'm putting it in the canvas, I'm moving it around to where I want it to be, I'm building my source reference, and then everything that I do from that point, the drawing and the wash and the painting, I bring it back in to Procreate and I compare it to make sure that I'm still online and doing what I want. And these are the gory steps if you want to take it home. But I thought, so we have, it's 7:46 and we're supposed to be done by 8:30. And if you would like, I would take you through a couple of steps here so that you learn what the buttons are that you have to press in your iPad and in Procreate to be able to do this, okay? So I propose that we spend, we'll time box it. We'll time box it to 25 minutes and see what we can learn in that time. And then we'll go on to the other things because we can talk, like I said, we can talk about AI, we can talk about sales and marketing. I do want to tell you about the business cards that I've got and what I've found using them. But let's do this. So I want, Robin, can you change to the other thing, the overhead here? All right. I said I need to understand how much time this is going to take, and I was going to do an example, and I started on this one.